Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my amazing co-host, Donovan. And today we're going to be talking about the pursuit of happiness. Is it worth chasing happiness? Well, let's get started. So, Donovan, what are your initial thoughts about the pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, so I have always found this to be kind of an interesting topic, but sort of a weird one at the same time, right? The idea to me of chasing happiness, I guess, particularly like just for the sake of chasing happiness, doesn't necessarily make sense to me, right? Happiness to me is sort of an outcome derived from some set of actions. So I guess basically you could try to align all of your actions around things that produce happiness, but it would be like chasing any other sort of emotion, right? Just like, oh, I'm going to be in the pursuit of anger, right? Like rephrasing it like that, it just sounds sort of weird to me, and it comes across sort of weird. Now, I think we've talked about it before. My idea of happiness is more encompassing than the emotion, but just initially, like the gut reaction to that sort of phrase is sort of strange to me. But I'd be curious what some of your thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment of it does kind of sit weird with me, this idea of chasing happiness. Like, I think it's good to have goals and desires. And of course, it's understandable that we'd all want to be happy. But I think what occurs to me when I hear the pursuit of happiness is not really accepting your reality as it is now, and not accepting that, life is going to have its ups and downs. You're not ever going to be, it's unrealistic for you to expect to be 100% happy 100% of the time. That's almost going to lead, if that's your expectation or your dream, then I feel like you're going to be vastly disappointed most of your life. And then you're kind of counteracting your desire of being happy because you're in this disappointment state of not being happy all the time. And so it's kind of like coming to terms with your reality, however it is. And even in those low moments, and also knowing what helps encourage those happy feelings. And yeah, I think it's okay to do those activities, but, also give yourself the space to explore those emotions, however they might be.
Yeah, I think what you just said helped me sort of unlock what feels so weird. And it's that this idea of chasing happiness doesn't really resonate with me because I see it as more of a process of cultivation, right? Like you find the things that create happiness and sort of bolster them where you can. And like you were saying, it's not realistic to think, that you can chase it down, like, hunt it down, find it, capture it, and then hold on to it forever.
Right.
That's not really the relationship that people have with emotions, and it's not really the way that emotions tend to unfold. So I think that is the part that feels so awkward or doesn't hit when I'm hearing this phrase. And I agree with what you're saying that, there is sort of these fluctuations and whatnot. So if you have in your mind this metaphor of like pursuit, you're never going to be able to really just catch it and pin it down.
Yeah. Right. And it almost sounds like this pursuit is like, oh, when I have this, then I'll be happy. Like, I can't be happy with the situation now because of my circumstances, and it's not ideal. But once my circumstances are fantastic, then I'll be happy, instead of just like being okay with, like, how do I find happiness in the present moment? What does that look like? And how does that manifest instead of this chase? I like the hunter example that you use, because that's a good way to illustrate the point that, if you were to see like happiness, like a deer that was just running and scampering off, and then you catch the deer, and then you lock it up in a cage, and you'll be like, well, now I'm happy now because I have this deer to say that I'm happy. But it's like, are you though? Is that deer? I don't know where I'm going with this. This might be a really random tangent, but the deer is not in like its natural state. It's not in its most authentic, beautiful state. It's kind of like in this trapped sense, and it's not really authentic, if that makes any sense.
I think you can tell me if this does not map to what
Yeah.
you meant.
Yeah.
But what I sort of picked out of that is when you're chasing or pursuing happiness, even if you manage to somehow accomplish that, whatever that really means,
Right.
it's probably going to come in some sort of artificial way that's not really genuine, authentic, or like able to last in the long term. Because again, I think having this sort of pursuit or chase type of mindset is indicative of just sort of a weird or non-long-term tenable relationship with the idea of happiness.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think it comes down to really understanding that happiness isn't a consistent state, or just our emotions are always in flux, and they ebb and they flow, and I don't really like to put labels of negative and positive, like happiness is positive and sadness is negative. I kind of steer away from those types of labels, because it's like all part of the human experience, and you don't even really appreciate some things, or you don't have as much happiness or joy. At least for me, I can only speak for myself. Like, I know when I go through challenging times in my life, when I get through it to the other side, that brings more happiness if I didn't have that challenge in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes more sense to think about sort of the full range of experiences and how those factor into your life as a whole, as opposed to another piece that at least when I've seen other people sort of use this, it's like chasing this one piece of experience. And like you were saying, expecting that can be a constant, and that expectation by itself is something that will keep you in, or can keep you in, sort of this like chasing sort of mindset, right? Is not recognizing, oh, sometimes you will be sad and there are things to be learned from that, or places that fits and is appropriate and useful. If you aren't in that mindset, then you can get sort of caught in this chasing loop. And I don't think it's weird, because in my mind, you can sort of make yourself unhappy by focusing so much on chasing happiness and not recognizing that it's not really, again, an appropriate relationship to sort of develop.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can be kind of counterproductive of your goal of chasing it and wanting it, and then not having it, or in this constant pursuit, it takes away from the joys of the everyday. What came to my mind, actually, I don't know if you watched the movie Click with Adam Sandler. Have you seen that? Yeah, I cried. That was like emotional for me, which is surprising from an Adam Sandler movie. But kind of the premise, I won't give it the whole reason why I cried away for those, unless there's spoiler alerts. I'll give a spoiler alert. But the whole premise of the movie is like Adam Sandler's character gets like this magical remote control where he can choose to fast forward through various aspects of his life. And so he chooses to fast forward through the uncomfortable parts, or the sucky parts, or the mundane, boring parts, and to just the good stuff, like the sex, or like the fun things to do. And then as he goes through this process, he realizes he's just this missing out, and it just starts to auto fast forward, and he starts to miss out on like really the good and the bad parts of life. And it's all part of the beautiful aspects of life in itself. It's just a surprisingly insightful movie for an Adam Sandler movie. I'd say I was very surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a very long time since I've seen it, but from what I recall, yeah, he sort of just like zones out and misses most of the experiences that are available to him, right. And he's really bummed out about it. And I could see in the same way, if you're just focused on happiness, if you just think that that's all that there is and that you should be able to experience it all the time, how you can end up zoned out or just missing all the rest of the experiences that are available to you and what they mean and where they fit in your life and sort of the purpose and whatnot. Obviously what we're mostly talking about here or trying to help people with is how to increase and cultivate happiness, but it's not an ends in and of itself. And even if I take the pursuit of happiness at a more charitable reading, and I say, okay, so I'm going to take it for like, what's the most useful thing that you could think of around this? It's still not chasing happiness for happiness sake, right? You're still chasing other things. You're looking at other experiences and your life as a whole and trying to tune your actions and whatnot to put yourself in those positions more often. But sometimes, like we've talked about before, like if you have something important you want to do, something that creates a sense of purpose, that is something I would call happiness, but it is not necessarily going to be fun. You might have to work really hard to get some of those things done. And again, when I hear people talking about chasing or pursuing happiness, I feel like it just generally hits that emotional state.
Yeah, I concur with that. It almost makes me think of, when people are pursuing a specific thing and they know they're gonna, that thing is going to bring them so much happiness. Like for me, finally getting my medical degree, that was like an elated state of happiness. I worked so hard for 4 long years. It was a rough road. So yeah, I knew that was like chasing that carrot in a way. But I think when that happens, people ultimately, you get that high from achieving the thing that you set out to achieve, but that's not sustainable. That's going to come crashing down at some point, and you're just going to be, okay, what's next? And it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I did that, but then on the flip side of that, now I have to deal with the real world and running a business and the hardships of doing that, and it's not easy. It's not all rainbows and butterflies all the time. So yeah, that's where I'd go. I do have a question for you. Like, what are your thoughts? I think we've clearly established that pursuing happiness isn't always the healthiest approach to do, but I don't know if our audience is confused, because maybe I'm a little confused. Maybe I want to tease this out a little of like, okay, don't pursue happiness, don't make it like your ultimate goal, but it's like, but we want to give you tools to be happy. So it's like, do you feel like we're being conflicting for our audience, or how would you kind of separate that out to be like, yeah, use the tools to be happy, but don't pursue happiness? What do you think about that?
Here's the distinction that I would make, and maybe this will help. Yeah. I would say that if you are looking at happiness as a goal, that in and of itself, it's less useful than looking at it as sort of a process, right? And looking at, if you look at it as a destination or something that you can achieve and be done, then that's what comes to mind for me when I think of pursuit, right? Like I'm going to catch it and then I'm going to achieve it and then I will have happiness
and I'll be done.
And that's it. Yeah.
Right.
That's the biggest line that I would like to draw. Okay. And it's going to be much more useful to think of it as a process or something that you cultivate. Like the metaphor that I like to use is like a garden, right? It's not something that you don't just have a garden and then you've accomplished a garden, right? I mean,
right, then you're done.
guess in one sense you can establish a garden, like create it, but the plants are going to grow and die, and then you have to plant new ones, and you're going to have to change things, and you have to pay attention to them and water them, and you might find one year that one particular plant that was growing well the year before isn't surviving anymore, and then you have to adjust some things and check the soil, and there's all these pieces of sort of the process. And I look at happiness much the same way, right? You're not going to have a point where you have caught happiness and you're done. You will continually be working at it. Sometimes you'll make progress, sometimes you won't. And there are definitely things, again, like with the garden, there are things that you can do that are most likely going to kill your plants. There are things that you can do that are most likely going to make you very unhappy. But on the flip side, in the same vein, there are definitely things that you can do that are likely to sort of cultivate and grow happiness, as opposed to, just leaving it to chance, but also not thinking that you will hit a point where you have completed the process and you're done. I don't know, does that help anything?
Yeah, no, I think that really helps clear it up, because what I'm hearing is that to understand that happiness is an ongoing journey that's going to evolve with time, that sometimes the tools you use now might not be as effective because your life and your circumstances could change. You know, maybe you start a family, maybe you go through a divorce, maybe you lose someone significant in your life, and maybe those tools that worked before don't work as effectively. So you have to kind of evolve, but you've learned things that might help, like grow some things in your happiness garden. But you know, sometimes you have to evolve with the climate change happens. So you have to evolve with that, instead of saying like, oh, once I'm done, then I'm done completely. That kind of reminds me of an example I use with some of my clients of, you know, when I'm encouraging them to meditate on a consistent basis, and it's called a practice for a reason. It's not like, oh, you do it and then you're good and then you stop. and then things kind of like the benefits stop too when you stop. And I kind of compare it to exercise. You can't just like exercise for a week and expect to be healthy and fit for the rest of your life. It's an ongoing process that you got to maintain it and keep going. And yeah, it gets easier in time as you explore different things. You explore your strengths, your weaknesses, you work on your weaknesses and tools to strengthen your weaknesses, and you get better with practice. And it's uncomfortable. You go through those learning phases, but there's always room to grow. There's always areas to explore and expand. And it's an ongoing process. And meditation, in my mind, is very similar in that it's grow. You get better the more you do it. It might be awkward and uncomfortable initially. You do it consistently, you start to get more of the benefits. It's not as awkward or weird over time. And you just maybe have to find the right style or type of meditation for you, perhaps. But it's explorative. It's an ongoing process, and you can reap a lot of benefits the longer you pursue it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to hone in on fitness, because I think that's a really, really good parallel. If I think about the pursuit of fitness, you know, when you think about that as an idea, it more naturally lends itself to sort of this like process and cultivation type of idea. But I think when I hear pursuit of happiness, especially when I see other people using it, a lot of times it's in this goal-oriented sense. But anyway, when you think about the pursuit of fitness, right, there's never going to be a point where you can just say like, I have reached fitness. I am now fitness, and I will be fitness indefinitely.
Yes. Now I can eat donuts all the time.
So I think that's a perfect parallel. So if that's the way people are thinking about pursuing happiness, then absolutely, I actually think that makes sense. I just typically don't see that, or like the surface level, or like the pop culture version of the pursuit of happiness or chasing happiness that I tend to hear about is in this more goal-oriented sense. And happiness does not fall into that category. It is more like fitness, where it's something that you continually sort of work at. And if you don't, the chances of you finding it often are very low. It's something that generally doesn't just happen by chance, but also isn't something that you can just achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to touch on, I'm curious if you watch this movie, since this kind of is the name of the movie, Pursuit of Happiness, with Will Smith. It's actually a book too. Did you ever watch that?
I watched that one, but that one's real fuzzy in my memory.
It's real fuzzy. Yeah, it's been a while. Oh no, I think I watched it twice, but I did watch it maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, where like Will Smith's character, and I'm sorry for all our listeners because I forget the name of the character, it's been a while. But basically, you know, Will Smith's character is really, he has a little boy. He's basically so broke he ends up homeless, but he's working at like this major stock brokerage firm. And he got this like incredible internship opportunity, which could put him on like a career path of like a better position for getting him out of poverty, essentially. But he has to do this like insane internship for a while to get there. And I think of the idea of like, okay, I put my nose to the grindstone and I work my ass off, and then I'll arrive. And I think, I have a lot of admiration for that. And I think that maybe that's like a different context, because it's like, okay, he's working his butt off in the sense of, putting him in a better, safer, stabler financial situation for his family is what his main goal is, which I think is inspirational. But I'm like, how do you separate that idea out of like, is he chasing happiness, or is he just chasing like survival and not having to live in poverty? Do you remember the premise now? Did I refresh your memory? Yeah.
Yeah, or at least I remember enough of it that I feel comfortable saying some words. So in my mind, the way that sort of breaks down is it is the pursuit of happiness in the sense of, if you're in poverty, for example, there are a long list of things that are very likely to make you unhappy, such as not being able to provide housing for your kid, right?
Yeah,
that's
definitely
a problem.
That is.
So when I think about it in the more holistic sense of happiness, which is to say, including purpose, and not just the emotional states, or even just factoring in sort of the timeline, if you think about the baseline for not working hard, right?
Yeah.
That means you're going to stay in that poverty state indefinitely, and you're going to have like 90% of the time unhappiness. And that's just a number I pulled out of nowhere. But based on what I remember from the movie, very unhappy, very stressed out, all those kinds of things. Yeah. If you think about that relative to the path taken, which is like, I will work really hard. It's not going to be particularly pleasant, but it might take a year or 2 years or 3 or 5, whatever. Overall, you're going to eliminate a bunch of those things that make you unhappy, which is basically, not having a place to stay, not being able to afford food, all that stuff. And it may cost you some time and effort up front, but ultimately you'll be happier in the long term. So I don't know if this answers your question. I kind of forgot, but I would say that it is the pursuit of happiness in the way that makes sense to me, which is to find the things that are making you either happy most often or unhappy most often, and either increase, the ones that make you happy, or find ways to decrease or eliminate the things that are making you unhappy. So poverty is a very clear example where if you don't have money for things, it's going to make you unhappy. If you figure out a way to get money, even if that takes more effort up front, that's going to save you heartache down the road.
Yeah. I guess to summarize what I was hearing from what you were saying is that, if you are, unhappy and you're in a difficult situation where you're in and if nothing, and you're going to stay in that situation if nothing changes. So it's like, it's almost like, okay, well, you can continue to stay in this uncomfortable, unhappy state, or you can go through the discomfort of working really hard and doing the work, and it's not going to be fun either, but ultimately it gives you a better opportunity to be happier in the long term. And maybe it's building up a skill set, maybe it's building a resume, whatever that might be, to position yourself into a better life circumstance, to not have the same things that are making you unhappy, like poverty, cause you unhappiness anymore. Yes.
Yeah. And I think as part of that too, the process itself doesn't have to generate unhappiness, which by that I mean, you can have a very strong sense of purpose while doing unpleasant things like working super hard, and still be happy or generate, some form of happiness. So I think it's, taking that sort of a path as a net win all around. Because like you were saying, the default path is you're just going to continue being unhappy, and you're probably not going to feel a sense of purpose because you're not achieving or sort of eliminating some of those things, or, in this example, like providing for your family when that's something that's very important to you. So if you get sort of tangible, and I think that's what's important, is not chasing happiness in terms of, if that movie was about him just like running around and trying to feel good, feel the emotion of happiness, it would be a much more hollow and terrible movie, right? So it's important that sort of the things that he was working towards very clearly related to eliminating parts of unhappiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Do you have any last or final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think I wish we would have gotten to I would have figured out the distinction between what I meant at the beginning instead of halfway through. But other than that, yeah, the main thing that I want to get across is just that if you look at it as more of a process than a goal, I think you're going to be much better served in the way that you sort of approach happiness. And if you think about it more as cultivation than pursuit, I think those will be useful sort of themes and analogies to try to draw.
Yeah, for sure. Agree. Yes. Try to find happiness in the present day too. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.